Welcome, everyone, to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I get to be your host today. We want to thank our sponsors, Halcyon Yarn. If you're looking for some beautiful yarns and weaving equipment, go check out Halcyon. Go to their website and see all their beautiful yarns that they have to offer in every color imaginable. So thank you so much, Halcyon, for being a sponsor of Textiles and Tea today. Remind everybody that we do take questions. We will take them the last 15 minutes of the program. Please put them in the Q&A because I can't see them in the chat. Especially today, I'm on a laptop rather than my big desktop, so it's hard for me to see everything. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and we love your comments. Keep those coming, but I can't see those comments as easily. Today, we have the one, the only, Bonnie Inouye. Bonnie built a loom in 1967 because she wanted to understand the power and the limitations of loom-controlled patterns. In the 1970s and 80s, she began teaching at the University of Maryland, teaching weaving, and she sold her work at craft shows and galleries. Long warps are practical, as we all know, but they can be boring. So she learned to create a new draft for each piece on the warp. She brought weaving software. She bought weaving software at Convergence in 1984 and a 16-shaft mechanical dobby loom in 1987. She added a compu-dobby in Fiberworks in 1990, and she enjoys teaching weavers how to use weaving software to make exciting new drafts. She has taught in 9 countries, written many articles, and a book exploring the multishaft design, now available in the 2nd edition with new chapters. And we're going to talk about that book today too. So welcome, Bonnie. We love having you here.
Okay.
Here she comes. Yay. Hey, Bonnie.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. We are honored to have Bonnie Inouye on our show. So thank you for doing this. We want to start with our silly question, which is, what is your favorite tea?
So I live in Colorado, and we have a company called Celestial Seasonings. And it's fun to take a tour of the company.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's my favorite Celestial Seasoning. It's the Bengal. I love Bengal.
Bengal spice. And in the tour, they say they used all the spices that you would use for chai, but they didn't put the black tea in. So it doesn't keep you awake. So
Oh, I
that's
didn't know that. I
a
didn't know
really
that. I've learned
nice
something new.
tea for evenings.
Um, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if that's just me. So if you can
Okay.
just talk up
Speak
a
up.
little bit, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So how did you get started? I know we talked about how way back when you built your own loom, and we're going to talk some about that also. But how
Oh,
did you get started in weaving?
well, I made pot holders as a kid. I sewed and knit some of my clothes. My grandmother taught me how to knit. My mom knew how to sew. While I was in high school, I learned embroidery stitches from books mostly and developed a style using flowers and leaves, flowers that I could see, and real flowers and the right leaves with them. I performed folk dances, international folk dancing, wearing my embroidered peasant blouses with full skirts. And then I guess it goes on to the next question, but it blends in. The skirts I made, my dad was working for the United Nations for a while, and as they traveled, my parents would get me 2-yard pieces of fabric and fabric with borders to make gathered skirts with borders for dancing. And I started looking at the patterns, and I had skirts at that point from 4 different countries. But the designs and the borders had something in common, even though the countries were far apart. And I figured out some of the basis of it. So they were 4-block designs.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that if they can do it in all these different countries, it must be basic, and I can make something myself that will make patterns like that and understand the patterns and limitations of those patterns. But I didn't have much money. I didn't have a woodworking room. My dad had one at home in Michigan, but I was at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. So I went into a local grocery store looking for wood things, and there were boxes for grapes and pretty good wood. And I asked them how much they would charge for the old boxes. And they looked at me and said, "You can have 2 of them. Pick out the 2 you want." So later, those became bookshelf items. I mean, I put boards across them, but for a first loom, I put nails. Let's see, I put the 2 boxes in an L, one slid inside the other, and then I put a triangle strengthening piece so the L didn't flop around. Little nails across the top and the bottom, and then I could string yarn, and I had knitting yarn between the nails. And then I took a piece of pretty heavy wire, which I don't have now, but this is a cord. You know how you can make a loop and then another loop? Can you
Yeah.
see that? So I made 2 of those, basically a not so rigid heddle. I had the yarn through the loops, and then I could choose which parts I wanted the warp yarn up. Those would show, and bend the thing so the loops were up or down. So I go across, 4 of them up, 3 of them down, 4 of them up, 2 of them down, whatever I wanted. And sure enough, I could make patterns out of it. But the other thing I learned was that wire, if you do this very many times, it breaks.
Oh.
So I had 4 little pieces, and I made a few more things, and I thought, now I need to see a real loom. And I went home for Christmas. I made a pillow, a cushion for my mom for Christmas present out of the strips I'd been weaving on the grape loom. And I said to Mom, don't you know somebody who weaves on a loom? And she said, yeah, but I'm pretty sure they're out of town this Christmas break. But she has her looms in a studio, and this is Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are weavers there still. It might have been Wild West, was a pretty well-known weaving place there. Anyway, we went in and saw the looms, and I took notes and went back home and asked my dad for some wood, the right sizes. And I got on the plane to go back to school with a duffel bag with boards and one shorter board with 4 big nails in it and a cone of cotton string. And I made heddles while waiting for the airplane. That back in those days, in the 60s, students could fly standby at very much reduced rates. So, and nobody worried at all about someone flying with a board with big nails sticking out. It's like, what are you doing with that? See, I'm making something for my loom.
Well, I have to tell everybody that when I proposed this question about the grape box to Bonnie, hope you don't mind me telling the story, she was like, why do you want to hear about that? I thought, because it's so Bonnie-like. You know, you wanted something, you went after it, you made it happen, you figured it out, you know. And I just think that's kind of how you've always approached weaving. You have figured it out. Even if it's
Yeah,
complicated or even if it's simple, you figured it out. So thank you for sharing that story.
thank
I
you.
think it's amazing. And all the comments are like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. One reason I've done so much teaching is I feel like I have got things figured out that I could explain to other people. I want to share what I have figured out with other weavers.
Well, it's a skill. Not everybody, a lot of people know how to weave well, but not a lot of people who weave well teach well. So we're lucky to have you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Well,
When I got back to Swarthmore, I realized someone named Marguerite Davison was in Swarthmore, and I easily found a used copy of her book. So that was where I started learning about drafts. I was like,
really?
yeah,
Did you ever meet her?
no, I didn't.
Oh, wow.
She wasn't still alive when I started actively weaving a lot.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay.
but there were copies of her book easily available in Swarthmore. I spent some time while I was a college student babysitting for faculty families. And one professor had a wife who was from Sweden. When I went over there, they had this great big wooden loom, like some of the ones I saw in Ann Arbor. And I said, can you teach me? And she said, you want to do natural dyes or weaving? I said, sure.
Yeah. Oh,
So I would come over and we'd do fiber things together on Saturday afternoons. And then I'd watch the kids Saturday night and they can go out.
no, how wonderful. I love the serendipity of weaving. If I hear from people that, you know, you meet the right person at the right time and that's how it sounds like that's what yours was.
Yeah.
Now, you were a math major, right, in college?
No, actually, I majored in art history
Oh, okay.
and I minored in math and French literature. And the balance changed from time to time. But I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher eventually, and a lot of variety would be useful. So
Yeah.
I also took education class, and I've
Well, I'm
used it.
always surprised how many weavers are math. They either majored in math, they studied math. What
I
do you
like,
think that connection is? That weavers and
um,
math?
I like numerical sequences. And I see a lot of the weaving designs coming from groups of numbers in various kinds of sequences. You can, I don't know, I think the math behind it all is one way it makes sense.
Well,
Okay.
you do a lot of functional items like scarves and napkins and things like that. But you've also done what we call wall art.
Yeah.
You've done both of those. But I think I read somewhere that you prefer the more functional pieces. Is that true?
Now, well, let's see. I've not woven any napkins yet, and only a few towels for my mother. And now I have those. But I think it's really nice to have things of beauty in use in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I like making textiles that are used. So let's see, the two pictures you've got. The left one is a wall hanging, and the right one is a scarf. The wall hanging is on the wall in my studio now. So one reason I'm not making many wall pieces now is that my walls are already full.
It's a good problem.
I ran out of wall space. I did some big commissions when I was younger. I did a 5-panel piece for a public library in Boulder, Colorado. And the panels were the dimensions of the shawls that I made. And the librarian at the time was an active member of the Handweavers Guild of Boulder, and so was I. So I went into the library with shawls and we played with it. And then they put up a track. So it was a meeting room in the library with windows on one side and a big white wall on the other side. And you could slide these 5 pieces. So I had to make the lines and the designs connect 2 and 3, or, you could have however much white wall you wanted. That was a fun one, but that room has since been remodeled. It was right around 1990, so it lasted a long time, and it was colors I dyed in the war that went with the carpeting and the chairs and tables in that room. So they needed something else when they replaced the carpet, which I hadn't really thought about. It was a new library.
Oh, it's too bad it's not there.
Yeah,
We would all go see it.
but that weaver is still a friend of mine.
Well, I think it's interesting that and I should have said this earlier, that you're really well known for multi-shaft weaving. And what's so amazing about it is that you can make curves out of a art form that is basically right angles, weft and warp. So
Yeah.
what was it, do you
Those are
think,
the
that
right.
made you say, I want things more organic? I want these curves.
Let's see. I already knew about vertical and horizontal lines because I wove potholders. And when I started weaving on a loom, it was a 4-shaft loom. Another one I built, and then I bought a Leclerc artist set and used that for a while. So vertical and horizontal lines are kind of too obvious, but you can make a diagonal line if you have 3 or more shafts. And a diagonal line has the slope. and it'll be like 45 degrees if your yarns are balanced, if you have the same number of yarns per inch as the warp as in the weft. But you can get a steeper one by putting, you can vary that by putting more threads and cramming them together, or finer yarns or whatever. And then it turns out in the draft, you can take that diagonal line. I don't see myself. Can you see my arm?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, so this is a diagonal line. And if I make the slope steep when I start off and then more gentle and then steep again, I have a design that undulates. And if I make it go steeper and then steeper and steeper and then round, I have a design with curves. I spend a lot of time in the Colorado mountains. And for years, let's see, since 71, David and I have spent summers and some sabbaticals at a high altitude field station, 9,600 feet.
Oh my God.
And so all around, I see mountains and streams and paths. And the mountains are diagonals, and you can make them steeper, right? But so not just a whole lot of points, but diagonal lines that meet can make mountains. And one of those early slides showed mountains made out of points. It's called San Juan Mountains. It was one of your first three. These are designs with curves. That's my clothesline. I was hanging clothes yesterday on that clothesline. So I like to make images to make curves like, yeah, that was part of a guild challenge. Make something inspired by the San Juan Mountains for the
Okay.
San Juan Weavers Guild. So you can see how the diagonal lines can connect to make mountains. And I use work colors to make the shadows. I collect images with nifty curves. I'm interested in curves, and I'll sometimes take a picture of a stream from up high just to have a record for what it looks like. So the one on the left is on a 16 shaft floor loom that I used to have here, 60-inch loom. There are 3 repeats in the threading and no repeats in the treadling, because usually that's how things flow, not necessarily with repeats anywhere. I also found that when I was working on, that's like a C curve and an S curve, they'll keep flowing if you soften those lines. As soon as you put in a straight diagonal, it stops the flow. It looks unnatural. So you have to go in and modify it. The one on the right, the left side is a turn-tide weave on 24 shafts with black and white and alternating in the warp, and a navy blue in the weft. It's actually 3 fine strands of silk combined to make the dark blue. And the one on the right is a modification of that same lift plan, but as a turned polychrome summer and winter. So there's white threads and purple threads and dark green threads. And I can bring which of those colors to the front I want. And those structures, let's see, the one with the blanket, the Afghan on the clothesline, that's covered in chapter 5 of my book. And then the other two would be in the two new chapters, 7 and 8.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your book a little bit later. But these images are amazing. And I don't know if you can see all the comments, but people are just saying how inspirational it is. And it really is. I don't know which I love more, the pattern or the color. They're just beautiful.
The blanket is dyed warp and a single dark bluey purple weft, and it's mohair. And people told me you couldn't do designs like that on mohair, but you can.
You proved them wrong, Bonnie.
Well, structurally, it's a twill, and people do use twills for mohair blankets.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, I thought it was interesting that you said, I read somewhere that you tell new weavers who come to you and say, Bonnie, I've got this, 12, 16, 24, shaft loom now. What book should I get to learn how to use it? And I loved it because you said what you normally tell them is, don't get a book, just go experiment. Is that true?
I say it's more fun to make your own drafts. And it can be hard if you have an idea in your head and you would like to make an afghan or a blanket that has streamlines flowing across it, and you want it, say, 3 repeats and it's 4 yards wide. You're not going to find that in a magazine, but you can do it yourself. And it's really fun to weave a piece that you've seen in your head. And there it is. That one was a wedding present for a nephew, and he's using it.
So what do you think? What helps to hear? What do you tell people when they're like, well, I'm not very good at that, or I just don't know how, and no. Because I can say that because that's me. I'm terrified to try to come up with something. So what do you think helps people get a little bit more confident to attack something like that?
Well, start with something simpler. I generally say if it's a new loom or if it's a loom where you haven't used all the shafts, start with a straight draw, like 1 through 16, repeated. And then with that threading, if you have a design in your tie-up, you can use a straight treadling and you get like a rubber stamp of the design in the tie-up. So you can once it's on the loom, you can make changes in the tie-up or the treadling or the lift plan. You're not going to change your threading usually. And I think that the designs to start with just have a solid color in your work, and you can cross it with different colors. So you're focusing on the design. And if a repeat of 16 threads in the threading seems too small, then move on and find how people work with bigger ones. I found that small repeats just got boring. If it repeats in 2 inches, which is not all that small, you weave a foot and then you're done. I mean, it's not that big a piece, but I was ready to move on. So one of the things I moved to was an advancing twill and then an expanded advancing twill. I did a lot with those in the early 1990s because you could have a diagonal line, but make it as big as you wanted.
Well, speaking of books, you have probably one of the primo books that if anybody is going to have multi-shaft looms, more than 4, even more than 8, this is the book that everybody says, oh, you got to get this book. And it sounds like you've added to it recently.
Yes.
But I loved it that you said that this is your workshop and you just put it in a book form.
Yeah. I taught a post-convergence workshop in 1992. Convergence was in Washington, D.C., and I was living inside the D.C. Beltway in Maryland. And the Potomac Craftsman Guild was a weaving guild at that point. And I really wanted to share things that I had learned about using 16 shafts. People now think 4-shaft looms are multi-shaft, but 4 doesn't seem like a big enough number to me. 4 is like all on one hand. So when I wrote the book, it was for 8 and more. A lot of the exercises can be done on 6 shafts, but there are not a lot of 6-shaft looms out there. And after I wrote it, there were new looms with 32 and 40 shafts, which I hadn't thought about and don't have yet, or I'm not doing that at this point. Let's see. The problem with teaching it as a Convergence associated workshop was that you need a loom for shared use. I mean, there's no way you can say everybody bring in a table loom with 16 or more shafts.
Yeah.
And there weren't any really at that time. There were people, 92. So I did find, I had a good friend, Chris Spangler, who had a 30-inch wide 16-shaft AVL loom, and she had the bars and pegs to do mechanical dobby and a computer assist. And we borrowed that. And we also borrowed a more basic table loom. And there were quite a few people in that room. It was a really exciting group. But the thing I hadn't realized would be fun, right by my door, Convergence people put up a sign that said Bonnie Inouye, Sweet 16. That was what I called the workshop. I hadn't been 16 for some years. I had a friend take a picture of me by the door.
I have visions in you in one of those big fluffy dresses for your Sweet 16 party. That's what.
Not at Convergence. But that was.
Well, let me ask you something, because other people might be curious about this too. You were saying that, and I think I read that in the opening, that the next edition that you had 2 new chapters,
Yes.
right? What are
Yes.
those chapters based on? So if somebody's saying, well, I have the original book, do I need to get the second book?
Yeah. I'm actually selling them now just as PDF files. And the first 7 chapters have been available as PDF, but it has a new cover for maybe 10 years or so. So the next 2 are longer and more advanced. Chapter 7 is tide weaves and chapter 8 is turn tide weaves. And so the picture on the cover that you've got on this screen is the one I used for turn tide weaves. That scarf in the picture came off the warp that I currently have on my 24 shaft loom. It's new. I had the colors in the warp are a grassy green and a dark royal blue alternating, because it's a turn tide weave and I'm pulling things forward to make images or shapes. I was exploring different geometric shapes. And I couldn't decide what color weft I wanted, except the lighter, you need a contrast in value, lighter and darker, right? So the lighter one is a grassy green with maybe a little gray in it. So I got out all these colors that were the cones of yarn that had different hues and somewhat different values, but none of them very dark. And so I set them all across on my ironing board, which was at the back of the loom. And I thought, oh, I can't decide unless I weave something. So I'll weave a sample piece and then make a scarf. But it turned out it was fun to blend from one weft. So this a single shuttle weave now. But if I want to bring in, say, from the light purple to a shade of green, I can weave some purple and then I go purple, green, purple, 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 green, right? You have 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 3 and then alternating. And it slows you down, but I'm not in a rush now. I don't I don't have any more high-end shows. I had a one person exhibit at a local art gallery, which was fun. But I just I didn't use everything that was on the ironing board, but I used a lot of different wefts. So on the right side, you can see more of the weft, and on the left side, you can see more of the work color. And it's a fun piece to wear because you can turn it over.
Bet. It's like having 2 scarves.
Yeah.
Well, I love the color that you used, and I love how you talk about the color. And so this next image is more color. And unfortunately, I don't think computers do this justice, but the image is just beautiful. And I'm always curious when I'm talking to people about color because it's frightening for some of us. And it's like, was color something that just came naturally to you that you knew what would go well together? Or was it experience of trying this and, oh, that's terrible, go on to this? Or
Well, some of each. This particular piece is turned Takate or gin. I dyed the warp,
oh,
and it's a form of tie-dye is process that I figured out like in the 70s. I graduated from Swarthmore in 69. Tie-dye was part of our culture. And I had tie-dye shirts and stuff. So this is maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 7 chains of warp.
wow.
So, and it was a long enough warp to make 4 or 5 shawls. This was a shawl, but my friend Peggy, who bought it, has it across the back of a chair that has a high back. She can still slide it off and wear it, but it's part of the decoration in her house.
It's gorgeous.
I just happen to know where this one ended up, and I've seen it there.
This next picture we're going to look at is called textured double weave. And I think if you look at it, you can really see the texture in it. It's just beautiful. And it's so funny because a lot of the artists, I always ask them, which do you think is more important for you, your texture or your color? And I was thinking, this really is a toss up for you because you are so strong on both. But if you had to choose which do you think is more important to you, the texture and the pattern, or is it the color? It's like choose your favorite child.
Yeah, I can't separate them really. Let's see. I tried to write down answers, but they're not coming in the same order.
I kind of jumped here. I apologize. It's
okay.
question 10, if that helps at all.
At mine. Well, let's see. I'm off
Or
the
just
page
tell
too.
us whatever you think. When you look
Yeah.
at this work, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I don't think in terms of just color and texture. For one
Okay.
thing, the color is the hue is what you're talking about, like the blue or the green or the purple.
Uh-huh.
But there's also value.
Yeah.
And when you're working with three-dimensional textiles, you want the value of the crinkly part or the pleaty part or whatever to be a pale value, because then you see it because there's shadows. And that shows up fairly clearly in these slides. There's a darker color that's more flat. And that's the flattest part because it's dark warp and dark weft. Probably not the same color, but both of those are non-shrinking. And it's which makes it flat where they're together.
Now,
So
is this wool? Do you remember? Or is this
the
cotton?
shrinking yarn is wool.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the one on the left, you can see there are 4 different color blends.
Uh-huh.
That's something that some people we discuss it. It's 4-color double weave in the literature. If you have 2 colors of warp, A and B, you could make double weave with A and B going in both directions. You'd have A crossing A and B crossing B. But this is weft C and D. So you have A crossing C and B crossing C and A crossing D and B. So there's 4 different color blends. And they turn out to be a clear aqua, that dark blue, the very light one. And then there's the one where the light is crossing the dark blue.
This is just gorgeous.
And I had to sample that. I always sample the colors and on my screen with the software. But when you're making textures, it's not the same. So I would weave samples. I wove a lot of samples. And I never found really good uses for this highly textured. I mean, I made a few scarves with it, kind of bulky.
Oh.
But it was fun.
Well, it would look beautiful hanging.
Yeah,
could you call it wall art?
Yeah, you could, but it's not wide enough. Well, so the other thing, the problem is you have to weave it bigger because when you wash it and it develops all that texture, it also gets smaller.
Well, I tell you, I'm sure there's plenty of people with their hands up going, if you want to get rid of that, Bonnie, just send that on over. I'll make it into wall art. It's just beautiful.
Thanks.
Now, this next piece, I have to tell you, when I'm choosing questions and images, it's all about me. I pick what I like. I fell in love with these, especially the one on the right when I figured out what you were representing in this. And these are just beautiful. And I thought it was interesting that you do representational, like these coffee mugs, which are just too cute. And then on the one on the right, it's more abstract, but it's snow on furs, right? Snow on, I think.
Yes, spruce. This is spruce fir forest.
Spruce, snow on spruce, right?
Yeah.
And when I saw the title, it was like, yes, absolutely, I see it. So I just think it's interesting that you can switch from one to the other, from a realistic image to something more abstract. So what do you think is the advantage and drawback to either one, either the abstract or the realistic? Do you like one over the other, or?
Well, to complicate this, I also paint and I make linoleum block prints. So when I'm working with images, I'm deciding between woven images and painting, usually on fabric or block printing. And I also do that on fabric.
Really?
So the one with the spruce trees started off as a geometric designs with diagonals. And then I had figured out how to get those back and forth shapes. They're made with points, and that's a 4-color double weave. And I can see the 4 colors, and it's not differential shrinkage, it's flat. And that hangs on the wall in the living room in the house. And I have a version of the coffee cups downstairs by the dining table. So that's a summer and winter tied weave. I have, when I'm working with woven imagery, I'm generally simplifying the drawing or the design. I like to draw. I enjoy making the challenge of making a draft. Like that's 16 shafts, so I have basically 14 pixels wide, and I can make it as long as I want. So I could make a longer cup for my coffee. I wore
Bonnie,
that.
I think your middle name is Bonnie. I enjoy the challenge Inouye.
Okay. But the downside to woven images is that, to me, when somebody says cute, I cringe.
Oh,
I
you may
don't
have said
want
that.
to do cute. I don't want to weave little teddy bears. Although I have a grandson whose middle name is Fox, and I made a baby blanket for him with red foxes on it. And wrapped around a baby. Okay, that I'll accept as cute. And he knows I made it for him. But I'm a small person, and it was, I don't know, it's too easy to just say small is cute, like
Yeah.
a baby.
Well, you also dye. You talked about it earlier that you dye your yarn. And this next image is, I just fell in love with this. It's a hand dyed warp on a 16 shaft loom. There we go. And what I thought was interesting is that you said that the weft is undyed wool. So want to talk some about this piece, but also I'm curious, why do you dye? I mean, it sounded like you started at an early age. Then when you first started weaving, you did dyeing. But what's the attraction for you for dyeing?
Um, Getting the colors I want. But when I worked with dyed chains, I dyed each one differently. So the orange part was here on one and down here on another. That's actually closer to red in the real piece. And if you turn this over, it would be much paler because there's more weft showing on the other side. Like the Afghan that was on the clothesline, this has like 2.5 repeats. You can see the X. So I did a lot of tying on and pulling through, using the same threading. And I used a finer yarn for the shawls and a heavier yarn for the blankets. But in each case, it's a large scale and 2 or 3 repeats across. And then when I'm doing the treadling made a large undulating line, and the tie-up on that has the plate design, PLAIT. So you can see the lines.
They're beautiful. I love that.
I'm not doing much with dyed warps anymore. In 2003, I got the 24 shaft loom that I have in the house, and it came with a sectional beam, and I got a warping wheel. And I started playing with parallel threadings with 2 or 3 layers. And I could just warp it on the sectional beam with the colors.
Well, what's next for you?
That's kind of hard. So currently I'm working on drafts that combine 2 different designs by interleaving layers in the warp and or in the weft. And that's something that I would never have done without weaving software. So
Oh,
you take one threading and put it on certain shafts, and then another threading, which could be the same one moved to a new position, or it could be a different one. And you can do that in the warp and or in the weft. And I can mix parallel lines and non-parallel lines also. So I'm interested in how your mind reads things that are doing 2 things, one on top of the other. So I'll experiment with that. The person who's in charge of the complexity exhibit that Complex Weavers does every year, she's a friend, and she came over to hike on her way to checking out the venue. And she said, "Bonnie, I hope you make something for complexity this year." And I have done that every year for quite a while. And that's a good challenge. I don't know if I'll get it done or not. But I've got time. I think the deadline is February of 2026.
good.
And the exhibit will be in Colorado. So that helps. I've also, those designs with the curves, I see those as strings, like a string theory. I need to write that up. I need to write an article or a monograph about that series, because I've done that with a whole bunch of different threadings and different weave structures. And my friend Mimi Anderson sent me an email and said, "Please tell me how you do this." So.
All right, we have got tons of questions. I'm going to get to them as many as I can.
Okay.
And I'm going to make sure that well, the first one is from Liz. She wants to know if your on your shirt, is that weaving on the front?
Yes, it is.
Of course it is. How beautiful.
Thanks.
They're going to ask what it is.
It's 4-color double weave, and within the segments, it's all flat, but I use twills in the different areas instead of plain weave.
You're amazing, Bonnie. Thanks for the question, Liz. That was a great question. All right, now here's a very long question, and I'm gonna narrow it down because somebody wants to know if Eleanor Inouye is related to you.
David's mother, my husband's mother,
There we go.
named Eleanor.
So Tina Davis said that she met you, and that somehow was introduced to spinning, dyeing, and weaving, and she, but it was through Eleanor that she did that. So there you go, Tina. It is the same person that you met.
And she's still weaving, Tina?
She said that she met you in the mid 1970s. Tina Davis.
Okay.
Deborah wants to know, do you design your curves in the lift plan?
I can do, it depends on the weave structure.
Okay.
I can make a curve and save it as a profile. And then I could interpret it with network drafted twills. That's what that blanket was.
Oh,
And I generally would save that as a profile and put in a tie-up and a treadling, because the tie-up is going to say which parts are, say, 2-2 twill and which are 1-3 or whatever. I can make modifications easily in the tie-up and quickly. But with the lift plan, I have more control over the individual pieces and the where the lines are going. So the other ones on the screen at that time, the 2 scarves with the strings, I've got designs in the lift plan with 2 strings and 3 strings. I did a series with ribbons as the design, and that led to ones with strings.
okay. Well, this is kind of a follow-up, and I think you may have just answered this. Somebody was asking about the coffee cup pattern. They want to know if it's shaft driven or pickup. It's shaft driven, right?
Yes, it's loom-controlled image.
Okay.
And I do design those in the lift plan.
How many shafts was the coffee cup? Do you remember?
16.
Okay.
Because I did it wove it in the cabin, and I've got 16 shaft loom in the cabin.
Okay. Thank you, Karen, for your question. This is a good question. Thank you, Esther, for asking this. What influenced you to study at Swarthmore? And what did you study? And did you weave in high school? I don't think you didn't weave in high school, did you?
No, I didn't. Well,
Yeah.
pop holders as a kid.
Why Swarthmore?
When I grew up in Ann Arbor, a lot of people went to the University of Michigan, but my dad was on the faculty and I already knew a lot of the teachers. And I really wanted a chance to live in a different part of the country.
Of course.
And I knew a couple, well, I was going to Quaker meeting, and Swarthmore has an affiliation with Quakers. And some of the people there were Swarthmore grads and talked to me about it. My parents happened to know somebody who was on the faculty, so we went to visit. And the school has an arboretum. It's full of nature, even though it's in Philadelphia. Well, it's a Philadelphia suburb. It's still a very pretty place to walk around.
Oh, that's good.
It's a small school, but it didn't have any studio art. That's why I took art history. It does now.
Oh. Somebody wants to know, what software do you use? Which ones do you like?
I use Fiberworks.
I'm sorry, what?
I use Fiberworks.
Okay.
But I use some of the tools that are in WeavePoint. And I have a friend who does the software Weave It Pro. And those are all worth considering. There's been others along the way. I think we're in an era where there's some turnover, and you should keep an open mind if you're just getting into weaving software, because it depends on what you want to do with it. And are you driving a computer assist loom?
Well, Bonnie, I can't thank you enough for being on here today. It's an honor to have talked with you. Years ago, you came to my guild and
which guild?
Taught a class.
Which guild?
It was the Chattahoochee Handweavers Guild in Atlanta.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Yes, it was wonderful having you there. But thank you so much for being on here and sharing with us just a little bit of your knowledge. But I hope you all will check out Bonnie's website. Now, she's on WordPress.com. There's another website address that will take you someplace else. So do the WordPress.com. And check out her book. If you're serious about doing multi-shafts, check out her book. I think you'll be very impressed. But we do want to thank you, Bonnie.
I kept the price low so that wouldn't give you an excuse for none.
You're a good person. You're a good person. Thank you, Bonnie.
I try. Thanks for inviting me. This was fun.
Well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad. I told you it'd be the easiest interview you ever had to do. So good for you. I want to thank our sponsor also. And I hope Halcyon is happy with this interview. What an interview it was. And we do thank Halcyon for being a sponsor of this. If you would like to sponsor an episode of Textiles and Tea, and we've got some open, and we got some incredible people that we're going to talk with, or your guild or your business, a group of you want to get together and sponsor, go look who's coming on, and maybe you'd like to sponsor a particular artist. You can go online at wespindye.org and you can purchase the sponsorship there. If you have any questions, call the office. We'll be glad to help you there. We also want to thank everyone who has joined or donated to HGA. Your donations and your membership keep us going. It helps us do Textiles and Tea. It helps us do Convergence. It helps us do the magazine. It helps us do everything that we want to give back to our weaving community happens through the donations or joining. So if you're interested, you can join online. You can donate online. You can do both at wespindye.org. And we appreciate everyone who is supporting HGA and weaving. If you've missed any episodes, please watch it again. Or if you want to watch it with a friend or tell a friend about it. And you can watch it on Facebook, HGA's Facebook page, but they changed the rules, and we're trying to let people know this, that it's only there for 30 days now. And so if you want to watch something from 3 years ago, you can watch it on YouTube. And if you like using YouTube, sign up, because if you sign up, you will get a notice every time a new episode is uploaded. So just keep that in mind. If you want to watch something within 30 days, you can still use YouTube, but after that, you can use Facebook, but after that, you'll have to go to YouTube. We are so excited. We're going to have Nicole Yi Messier next week. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and thank you so much for joining us today, and happy tea.